I never knew the swamp had a smell until I inherited the house. It wasn't just rot or moisture, though those were thick in the air, but something deeper, like decay mixed with regret. My Aunt Clara passed 2 months ago, someone I hadn't seen since childhood. She wasn't close to the family anymore, lived alone, far from the rest of us. When the lawyer called to say she'd left me her house, I didn't feel much, just confusion. I didn't even remember her voice. But the offer was real. The house was mine, along with the land it sat on, nestled deep in the bayous of southern Louisiana. The drive took longer than I expected. Concrete highways turned into cracked roads, and then into gravel. Finally, nothing but dirt and overgrown grass winding into a wet green world. Cypress trees loomed overhead, Spanish moss hung like whispers caught in midair, and the further I went, the more it felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. At the edge of the property, there was a wooden post. A sign nailed to it in faded red paint read, "Don't let the house call to you after dark." I thought it was a joke, a relic from Clara's superstitious ways. Still, I stood there longer than I should have, the heat crawling across my back, the insects screaming in the dusk. Something about those words clawed at my mind. But I shook it off. I was tired, and the house was ahead. I just wanted to get this over with. The house rose from the swamp like a half-sunken memory. 2 stories, Victorian bones, gray wood eaten away by time and humidity. Its shutters were crooked, its porch sagged, but somehow, it looked like it was waiting. The strangest thing was the silence. The swamp had been so loud on the drive-in, frogs, birds, cicadas, but as soon as I stepped onto the porch, the world muted. I turned back. The sign was just barely visible through the trees. Inside, the air was thick and warm, the kind that settles into your clothes and clings to your skin. I could still see Clara in the dusty furniture, the floral print armchair, the knitted throws, the mismatched dishes in the cabinet. But it all felt untouched. Preserved. Like she'd left suddenly and didn't plan to be gone long. A candle sat burned to the stub in the kitchen. A teacup still held dregs of something black and tar-like. I couldn't tell if it was old or fresh. Upstairs, I found the bedroom she'd locked from the inside. I had to break it open with my shoulder. Inside, everything was different. No dust. No decay. Just a perfectly kept room with a wooden chest at the foot of the bed. On the chest was a note in Clara's handwriting. If you hear them whisper, don't answer. If you see them watching, don't stare. The house is alive, and it knows you now. I should have left then. Driven back down the dirt path and never looked back. But something kept me there. Curiosity, maybe. Or maybe the house had already started its work. That night, I lit a few lanterns and tried to sleep in the living room. But the swamp didn't let me rest. I heard things. Not the usual chirps or hoots. Whispers. Not voices, just the rhythm of speech without words. It was like the house breathed them in and exhaled them against the walls. The boards creaked in strange patterns. Once, the old grandfather clock in the hallway chimed, but it wasn't set. It hadn't moved all day, and I hadn't touched it. Around 3 a.m., I heard something knock. Not on the door, on the window. A slow, deliberate knock, 3 times. I didn't move. I just stared at the ceiling. Then it came again. But from the opposite side of the room. Knock. 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 I stood, heart hammering, and crept toward the window. Outside, the swamp was pitch black, the moonlight barely cutting through the mist. But I saw movement. Just beyond the trees. A shape, tall and narrow. Watching. I blinked, and it was gone. I told myself it was nerves. I was tired. Swamps do weird things to sound. It was probably an animal. But I couldn't convince myself. Not after what happened the next morning. I found the chest in Clara's room unlocked. I hadn't touched it. Inside were dozens of notebooks, handwritten journals. The first page read, June 3rd, 1998. The house started talking again. I think it wants someone new. The entries got darker. Pages filled with paranoia, strange sightings, warnings about the swamp. Things about the pale men, and a phrase that kept repeating, they live in the stillness. I spent the entire day reading, flipping through Clara's descent into whatever this was. By nightfall, I was scared. Not just of the house, but of what it was doing to me. I hadn't left. I hadn't even wanted to. I told myself I was trying to understand what Clara went through, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. The house had a weight. Like gravity. It pulled at you. Like it needed something. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, measured, and never stopping. Like someone pacing the hall outside Clara's room. At one point, they came down the stairs. But when I looked, nothing was there. Then came the laughter. Soft, like a child. From the corner of the room where the shadows pooled the deepest. I shined a flashlight, but nothing was there, until the bulb flickered, and I swear I saw a face. Not full. Just the faint outline. Pale. Eyes too wide. Mouth curled into something between a smile and a scream. When the light came back on, it was gone. I ran out onto the porch, gasping for air. The swamp was boiling with sound again. Frogs. Crickets. Distant splashes. But the moment I stepped off the porch, everything stopped. Dead silence. Like the world had drawn breath and refused to exhale. And then I heard it. My name. Not whispered. Spoken. From behind me. I turned. Nothing. Just the house, its windows dark, its boards creaking softly in the breeze. But it called again. This time, from inside the house. I stepped backward. My foot hit the edge of the porch, and I almost fell. The swamp seemed to stretch in every direction, no path visible anymore. Just water, trees, and fog. Like the road had never existed. I was stuck. And worse, asterisk, I didn't want to leave. Asterisk. I slept with the lights on, every single one I could find. When morning came, I found muddy footprints leading from the back door to the foot of the couch where I'd been sleeping. Barefoot. Thin. As if a child had been standing there, watching me. I followed them outside, past the porch, into the trees behind the house. That's when I found the graves. 5 of them. Unmarked, shallow mounds, with simple wooden stakes. Old. Weathered. One of them had been recently disturbed. The soil was looser. The grass around it freshly trampled. Beside it was another sign. Feed the house, or it takes what it wants. I ran back to the house and packed my things. I didn't care anymore. I was done with Clara, done with her secrets, done with the whispering walls. I just wanted out. But when I reached the front yard, the road was gone. The trail that brought me here, wiped clean. Only swamp remained. I don't know how long I stood there staring into the swamp. The road that brought me in vanished like it had never existed. No tire marks. No gravel. No indentation in the reeds. Just black water stretching out beneath drooping trees, the mist thickening with every breath. I turned slowly, my heart sinking, and looked at the house again. It looked taller now. Or maybe narrower, as if the boards had stretched while I was gone. Its windows glared at me like blind eyes. The front door was still slightly ajar, just enough for a sliver of darkness to bleed through. I didn't want to go back inside. But there was nowhere else to go. The swamp surrounded me like a coiled snake, patient and eternal. I stepped back onto the porch. It creaked louder than before, like it recognized me now. Inside, the lights I had left on were all off. I flicked switches. Nothing. The power was gone. A sudden gust of wind passed through the house, slamming the front door shut behind me. It locked with a sound that echoed through my chest. I was trapped. 4 hours, I sat in the middle of the living room, flashlight in hand, trying to stay calm. I recited my own name. I hummed. I read from Clara's journals. I told myself I was real, that this was just an old, broken place. That old houses had histories. Creaks. Groans. I told myself that, but I didn't believe it. Not anymore. Because somewhere above me, I heard someone crying. Not sobbing, just a soft, pitiful whimper. A child, maybe. Or something pretending to be one. The sound moved. From the attic to the hallway, then to the top of the stairs. Each step it took creaked in rhythm with the cry. My flashlight flickered. I pressed it hard, hand shaking, and aimed it toward the staircase. There was no one there. But the crying was louder now. I aimed the light up and saw a shadow dart across the railing. Thin and fast. I called out, "Who's there?" And something answered. Laughter. High-pitched. Echoing. Coming from every direction. I backed into the kitchen and locked the door behind me. My hands fumbled for the matches I'd found earlier. I lit an old oil lamp and watched as shadows curled and danced against the walls. The kitchen felt slightly safer. Solid. Like Clara had spent time here. I could still smell herbs and something faintly metallic. Maybe blood, maybe rust. I noticed a photograph pinned above the sink. Faded and water-damaged. It showed Clara standing with two other people. A man and a child. But their faces had been scratched out with something sharp. On the back was a note. Only I stayed. The others listened to the house. That's why it wants more. The lamp sputtered. The air shifted. Grew colder. I turned and saw something standing just beyond the hallway, partially obscured in darkness. Tall. Slender. Not human. Not quite. Its limbs were too long, its head tilted too far. I couldn't make out its face, but I felt it watching me. I slammed the kitchen door shut again. Barricaded it with the table. I curled up behind the island, clutching the lamp. My breath came in short bursts. The house was no longer pretending. It wasn't whispering anymore, it was calling. That night, I dreamed of the swamp. But not like it was now. I saw it before, when it was dry land. There was a village where the trees now stood. Simple homes. Dirt roads. I saw Clara as a young woman, standing at a well, looking down into it. Behind her were others, villagers with blank eyes and open mouths, silently circling her. Then the ground opened. Darkness poured from the well like smoke. A thick black fog. It swallowed the people, the trees, the land. Everything. And from that fog came a shape, tall, faceless, and hungry. I woke up screaming. The lamp was out. The kitchen door was open. But the table hadn't moved. Something had come through anyway. I ran upstairs, trying every window, every door. All nailed shut. Some I didn't remember ever seeing before. I swear the layout of the house had changed. The hallway was longer. New doors had appeared. One of them was red and made of iron. It pulsed when I touched it, like a living heart. I didn't open it. I returned to Clara's room, hoping for answers. Maybe the journals had something I'd missed. I rifled through drawers, opened the closet, and found a trapdoor at the back, half hidden behind a row of old coats. The attic. I lit a candle and pulled it open. The air that came through was freezing. Stale. I climbed up slowly, each rung of the ladder groaning under my weight. The attic wasn't dusty. In fact, it looked recently used. Someone had laid out dozens of small dolls, handmade, crude, like voodoo figures, all positioned in a circle. In the center sat a cracked mirror covered in symbols. And written across the floor in chalk was a sentence. "The house reflects what you fear." I didn't know what that meant, until I looked into the mirror. And saw myself, but not as I was. This version of me was thinner, pale, hollow-eyed, mouth twitching. I blinked, and it blinked late. A half-second delay. It grinned. I stumbled backward, knocking over the candle. The flame caught on a dry rag. I panicked, stamping it out, smearing ash across the dolls. The mirror cracked. The reflection laughed. And then I heard footsteps below. Running. Fast. Not one person. Asterisk many. Asterisk. The floorboards beneath me trembled as if a crowd had gathered on the first floor. I crept to the trapdoor and peeked down. Nothing. But the footsteps continued. I descended slowly. Each step felt like a mile. When I reached the bottom, the hallway was full of people. At least, that's what it looked like at first. But they weren't solid. Figures made of mist and memory. Some moved like dancers, others like puppets. All of them wept. Their mouths opened in silent screams. They turned as I entered. One stepped forward, a child with no eyes, pointing at me. The others followed. I turned and ran, but the house stretched again. The hallway grew longer, impossibly long. The walls bled pictures, Clara's memories, maybe. Each one showed me, older, sicker, trapped. I was in all of them. I slammed into the iron door. No choice now. I opened it. Inside was a staircase descending into blackness. Cold, wet air flowed upward. I hesitated for only a second before stepping down. The basement was unlike the rest of the house. It was made of stone. Old, wet. Moss grew along the walls. A pool of dark water sat in the center, and above it, symbols were carved into the ceiling. Clara was there. Or what was left of her. Her body was mummified, cradled in the corner like a sleeping child. Her eyes were gone, her mouth stretched into a permanent grin. In her hands, she clutched a notebook. I took it, whispering an apology. The final pages were different. They were warnings. Not just about the house, but about what lived beneath it. Something old. Something buried when the swamp was still dry. Clara had been chosen by the house. It fed on grief, isolation, remorse. And when she no longer provided enough, it wanted new blood. That's why it gave her the dreams. That's why it made her call to me. I was never meant to inherit the house. I was meant to replace her. The final page was just 4 words. Don't answer the knocking. And then the door above slammed shut. I looked up. I wasn't alone in the basement anymore. A shape emerged from the pool. Tall, thin, featureless. Water rolled off its body but didn't touch the floor. It stepped forward, and I couldn't move. My legs locked, my heart stopped. It didn't have a face, but I felt it smiling. It spoke my name like it had always known it. Not just the name, but the shape of it. Each syllable landed on the basement walls like a cold touch, sinking through my skin, rattling my bones. The thing rising from the water was not of this world, not a ghost, not a memory. It was older than the house, older than the swamp. It made the swamp. I couldn't move. My legs trembled, but they wouldn't respond. My breath fogged the air as the thing took a step forward, soundless. Water pooled around its feet without rippling. It had no eyes, but I could feel its gaze, like 1,000 insects crawling under my skin. Then, it stopped. It tilted its head, slightly, curiously, as if waiting for something. Listening. I heard it too. Knocking. Not above. From inside the house. The entity slowly turned its featureless head toward the ceiling, and for the first time since entering that cursed house, I felt it hesitate. That sound, the knocking, it didn't belong to it. Something else was coming. A moment later, I was alone. The creature slipped silently back into the black pool, vanishing without a ripple. The air warmed slightly. The candle on the far side of the basement sputtered to life on its own, casting long, shaky shadows across the stone walls. I backed toward the stairs, holding Clara's final notebook against my chest like it could protect me. When I emerged into the hallway again, it had changed. Again. Now the house was dressed in mourning. Black ribbons lined the walls. Portraits of people I didn't recognize hung crookedly, each face distorted. Their eyes were gouged out, mouths stitched shut in the paintings. I stepped carefully through the corridor, floorboards moaning underfoot, the air thick with the scent of flowers rotted long ago. The knocking came again. This time, louder. Deliberate. 3 knocks. Then silence. I followed the sound. It wasn't coming from the front door. It was deeper, behind a door I hadn't noticed before. Ornate, with a serpent carved into the handle. I reached for it. Paused. Clara's words from the journal echoed in my mind. Don't answer the knocking. I stepped back. Then the door began to bulge, pulsing outward like something was pushing against it. A deep groan filled the walls. And then it spoke. A voice on the other side whispered, "Let me in, please, it's cold." It was my voice. I ran. Back up the stairs, into Clara's room. I slammed the door shut and pushed the dresser against it. My heart thundered in my chest. I opened her notebook again, flipping to a page I'd missed. This one had a drawing, a crude map of the house, with one section circled in red. A trapdoor under the floorboards in the sitting room. I had to find it. Whatever Clara had hidden there, whatever she tried to keep buried, it might be the key to getting out. I crept back down the stairs, avoiding the door with the serpent handle. It was no longer knocking. Now it was scraping, as if something was slowly dragging its nails across the inside. I entered the sitting room and pulled the rug away. Sure enough, beneath the warped wood was a small metal ring. I pulled it, and the floor opened with a scream. The stench was unbearable. A second basement. Unlike the first, this one was filled with relics, bones, old books, jars of murky fluid. And in the center, an altar. Blood-stained. Cracked. Around it were symbols I recognized from Clara's attic, protection runes, containment spells. And behind the altar, nailed into the stone wall, was a skeleton. Still wearing a dress. Clara. But how? If her body had been in the basement before, then who, or what, was the mummified thing I'd found? In her final notes, Clara had written something I hadn't noticed the first time. I tried to stop it. I gave it pieces of me. My hands, my tongue, my sleep. But it always wanted more. In the end, I made a deal. Part of me walks, the other part watches. That's the price. That's the anchor. The Clara I'd seen before, that wasn't her. It was what remained. What the house let remain. She had bound herself to this place, trying to contain the evil under it. To anchor the creature in one form. But it was breaking loose. The knocking, the shifting rooms, the whispers, it all meant the bindings were failing. The house was unsealing itself. And I was the new key. Behind me, something moved. I turned and saw one of the jars trembling. Inside it was an eye, floating in yellowed fluid. It blinked. Then another jar shattered. A black ooze spilled onto the floor, slithering like a snake. I bolted up the ladder, slammed the trapdoor shut, and ran. The serpent door stood open now. A cold wind poured out of it, heavy with rot. I didn't want to look inside. But I did. The room beyond was impossibly large, far too large for the house. The ceiling stretched into darkness. Trees grew from the floor, *swamp trees*, inside the room. Their roots cracked through the wood and wept black sap. At the center of the room stood the thing again. Taller than before. It had grown. Or maybe it had shed something. Its limbs were longer, its mouth wider. It had a mouth now, stitched shut with twine. But I could see it straining. Beneath its chest pulsed something alive, like a second heart. It held something in its hands. My photograph. The one that had been on Clara's wall. Except now, my face was scratched out. And in the corner of the frame, a new name had been carved. Mine. It didn't speak this time. It just pointed to the altar room below. It wanted me to finish the ritual. It wanted me to become Clara. To take her place. I stumbled back, screaming, and the house groaned with fury. The walls bled. The floors cracked. Paintings melted into screaming faces. From the swamp outside, I heard voices calling my name. Not one. Many. All versions of me. Some sounded desperate. Some sounded eager. And one sounded hollow, like a shell echoing with static. I couldn't let it happen. I ran to the attic. Knocked over the circle of dolls, smashed the mirror, set fire to the rags. The flames caught fast, licking up the dry wood. Smoke choked the ceiling. The house screamed again, but this time it was pain, not anger. I raced down the stairs, coughing, eyes watering. The creature's room was writhing now, its trees burning, sap sizzling. It reached for me, its mouth finally ripping open. From inside came hundreds of voices, all of them mine. I threw Clara's final journal into the flames. The fire exploded. The house shook like a living thing. I dove through the front door as the porch collapsed. Crawled into the swamp. The fog parted, and I saw it. The road. The real one. I didn't think, I ran. Clothes soaked, lungs burning, I sprinted down the path. Behind me, the house roared like a beast in death throes. Trees cracked, windows shattered, and then silence. I reached the car. It started on the first try. I drove for hours, never looking back. Not even once. When I finally reached a gas station, I stepped out, shivering, covered in mud. The clerk looked up and frowned. Rough trip. I nodded slowly. I was at the old house in the bayou. The one that belonged to Clara Rousseau. He froze. That place burned down 15 years ago. I didn't respond. Couldn't. Because when I looked into the side mirror of the car, I saw the reflection. Not mine. Not anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I booked the cheapest motel I could find off the highway and bolted the door shut with everything in the room. Chairs, an ironing board, even the dresser dragged in front of the frame. The lights buzzed overhead like angry flies, and I couldn't stop staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. It wasn't wrong. But it wasn't right either. It blinked when I blinked. Smiled when I did. But there was a weight behind its eyes that didn't feel like mine. Like something was crouched just behind the glass, waiting. I splashed cold water on my face and told myself I was just traumatized. I'd been in a nightmare. A swamp house full of hallucinations and grief, mold spores in the air, isolation-induced hysteria. That's what the rational mind said. But deep down, I didn't believe it. Because the mirror fogged over, and something began to write on the surface. Come back. I staggered out of the bathroom, heart slamming in my chest. The writing faded, the steam gone. I sat on the motel bed, turned on the TV for noise, and tried to drown it out. But that night, I dreamed of the house again. Except this time, I wasn't inside. I was watching it. From a distance. From beneath the water. Like I was the swamp itself. In the dream, the house breathed. Each floorboard moved with a pulse. Its windows were wide open, and inside I saw shapes moving, people who didn't belong to time. I saw Clara. I saw the creature. I saw myself, walking through the halls, searching for something I didn't recognize. And then, in the dream, the house saw me. It turned. Windows like eyes. Porch like a mouth. It whispered something I couldn't hear, but I understood the meaning. You never leave. I woke up screaming. It was 3:07 a.m. There were scratch marks on the inside of the motel door. 3 long gashes. I packed and left immediately, driving aimlessly until dawn, until the mist thinned and the sun barely warmed the horizon. I told myself to go home. Return to the city. See a doctor. See a priest. Just get away from that part of the world. But I couldn't. Because in my bag was Clara's final page. I don't remember packing it. I thought I'd thrown it into the fire. But there it was, slipped between the folds of a shirt. On the back, a new sentence had appeared. It's not over until it chooses another. I had burned the house, broken the mirror, escaped the swamp. But none of that mattered. Because I'd been marked. And the only way to stop it was to finish what Clara started. I needed answers. Real ones. Not just the journal. I needed to know what the house was, and why it chose me. So I drove to the county archives. Small, dusty building off a rural road, run by a woman in her 70s who looked half asleep even while talking. When I mentioned the Rousseau house, she stiffened. You should forget that place, she said quietly. Nothing good comes out of the Bayou Rougarou. I pressed her. Told her I was family. She sighed and led me to a back room. Pulled out a box with a faded tag, * Rousseau Estate, sealed records. *. Inside were old deeds, photographs, newspaper clippings. I sorted through them, my hands trembling. One article stood out. May 13th, 1952, ritual sacrifice suspected in Bayou House fire. It detailed the burning of a previous structure on the same land, before Clara's house. A preacher and his congregation claimed the land had awakened. Witnesses spoke of blood rituals, missing children, unnatural growth in the swamp, and sightings of a pale one with no eyes and no mouth. Another photo, a group of people bound in a circle, surrounding a woman with a stitched mouth. Her face looked eerily like Clara's, though the date suggested it was decades too early. Beneath that photo was a note. They do not age like us. The ones who serve the house live longer, but they are not alive. I left the archives shaken to my core. Every piece pointed to the same thing. The house had always been there. In one form or another. The building changed. The land warped. But the entity at the center remained. And it fed through inheritance. Not bloodlines, Asterisk choice. Asterisk. Clara had chosen to stay. I had chosen to come. Even now, back in town, the signs were all around me. Crows that didn't move when I walked by. Strangers who watched too long. A girl on the sidewalk humming the same tune I'd heard from the attic dolls. I was bringing it with me. The house was no longer bound by place. It had found me. And it was following. I tried to check into another motel. The clerk scanned my ID and frowned. "You already checked in," he said. "No, I didn't." He turned the screen toward me. "Room 13. Booked last night. Name, mine. Signature, mine." I stared at the paper. It wasn't my handwriting. It was Clara's. I left. I didn't know where I was driving anymore. My phone wouldn't hold signal. The gas gauge dropped faster than it should have. I pulled over at a rest stop, head pounding. That's when I saw the house again. Not in front of me. In the rearview mirror. Clear as day. Sitting in the parking lot, surrounded by asphalt. No swamp. No trees. Just there. I turned to look. Nothing. Just cars. Cement. Trash cans. I looked back at the mirror, and the house was closer. Then the knocking began again. Inside the car. 3 slow raps, from the trunk. I floored the gas. Didn't stop until I reached a church at the edge of a town I didn't recognize. The doors were unlocked. A pastor stood inside, sweeping. I begged him for help. Told him everything. He listened without blinking. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "You should never have opened the door," he said. "That house is older than God in those parts. Older than language. The swamp is just its skin. Can it be destroyed?" I asked. He looked at me like I was a child. "It doesn't die. It changes hosts. You've been claimed. You carry it now." I broke down. I didn't want this. Didn't ask for it. He placed a hand on my shoulder and handed me a small bottle of oil. "This won't stop it. But it might buy you time." I slept in the church that night. But I still dreamed. Of the house. Of the mirror. And of a version of me standing at the altar with black eyes and a grin too wide, whispering, "It's your turn now." The church was quiet when I woke. Too quiet. No wind outside. No birds. No footsteps. Just the oppressive stillness I'd come to fear. I sat up in the pew, light from the stained glass windows painting fractured colors across my arms. For a fleeting moment, I thought I was safe. That I had outrun it. That maybe the old priest's anointing oil and quiet prayers had given me sanctuary. But the moment I looked toward the altar, I knew I was wrong. A single chair stood there now, one that hadn't been there last night. A rocking chair, old and familiar, and draped across its back was a shawl I recognized too well. Clara's. And carved into the pulpit in fresh, red strokes were the words, "This house has no walls." My heart sank. It had followed me even here. I stumbled outside into the pale morning light, eyes darting across the small town square. People moved like ghosts, slow and silent. One man stood watering his front porch, but the can was upside down and empty. A woman walked her dog, but the leash dragged behind her, no animal in sight. Everyone's eyes were glazed over, distant, blank. I didn't exist to them anymore. The house was closing its hand around me. I climbed back into my car, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only real thing left. The priest had told me I carried the mark. That the house had chosen me. But he was wrong about one thing. I didn't want more time. I wanted to end it. No more running. No more signs. No more knockings in the night. If the house had chosen me, then I would drag it back to hell with me. I drove straight toward the swamp. Back toward Bayou Rougarou. Every signpost blurred. Trees blurred. My thoughts blurred. But the road stayed clear. It was as if the world was helping me find it now, welcoming me back. And when I reached the place where the path had vanished before, it was waiting. Just like the first time. The dirt road was there again, winding through the trees like a scar. Spanish moss hung lower now, brushing the roof of the car. The air was still, but heavy, too heavy to breathe properly. I stepped out, the familiar crunch of gravel underfoot pulling me deeper into memory. The house rose ahead. But it was different now. No longer ruined. No longer weathered. It stood tall, immaculate, as if time had reversed for it. The shutters straight. The wood newly painted. The porch polished and inviting. Lights glowed behind the windows. Smoke curled from the chimney. It looked like it had always wanted to be seen like this. I stepped onto the porch, and the door opened before I touched it. Inside, the house welcomed me like a returning relative. The furniture was polished, books perfectly shelved, candles flickering in wall sconces. The air smelled of cinnamon and burnt roses. Somewhere upstairs, a music box played a lullaby I hadn't heard since I was a child. The exact tune Clara used to hum when she visited my parents. The house had always known me. "Hello," I called out. My voice didn't echo. It was swallowed. But someone answered anyway. Footsteps. From upstairs. I climbed slowly, each step warm beneath my feet like blood. At the top of the stairs, the hallway had changed again. Instead of Clara's bedroom, there was only a single door, massive, arched, covered in carvings that moved when I looked too long. Faces. Hands. Mouths open in warning, or in song. I opened the door. Beyond was the mirror room. But it was no longer cracked. Now it was whole, clear as water, and inside its reflection was me. Except not as I was. The reflection smiled wider than a human could. It wore my face, my clothes, but something inside it pulsed, slick and serpentine. It stepped forward, out of the mirror, and the house shook. We stood facing each other. Two of me. One real. One claimed. "Why?" I asked. The thing that wore my face tilted its head. "Because you were the perfect replacement," it said. "Because she called, and you listened. And because you believed the lie of escape." I reached into my coat and pulled out the last of Clara's journal pages, the ones I'd rewritten myself. Ritual instructions. What she had started to do, but couldn't finish. The only way to truly end the bond. Not by running, but by breaking the chain. The house needed lineage, not by blood, but by consent. It needed inheritance. But if I renounced it, if I gave it nothing, it would starve. The thing snarled. "You belong to us now. There is no leaving." I smiled. "No. There's no returning." I pulled a flask from my pocket. The priest's oil. And then, before the thing could move, I smashed it across the mirror. Flame roared across the glass. The room howled. The creature screamed, not with sound, but with memory. I saw flashes, every soul it had taken. Clara. The boy from the photo. Strangers lost in the swamp. A line stretching back centuries. The mirror cracked. The house groaned. And then I shouted the words Clara had written, the ones etched in blood at the altar. "You cannot keep what is freely given back." The floor beneath me split. Fire climbed the walls. The creature lunged. I tackled it, both of us falling into the broken mirror. Glass tore at my skin. Visions flooded my brain. Clara, bound to the altar. The pale one rising from the swamp. Endless faces, mine, not mine, all staring. And then, silence. I woke in water. Not swamp. Lake. Morning sun cut through the trees. Birds sang. I lay on the shore, coughing, weak. My car sat beside me, half buried in mud. But the house. Gone. Not ruined. Not burned. Just gone. No path. No porch. No chimney. I drove back to town. And this time, when I passed people in the street, they saw me. Their eyes were normal. Their dogs barked. Their sprinklers sprayed actual water. And I knew I was free. Weeks passed. I returned home. Tried to live normally. Still, some nights, I dream of the house. But it feels distant now. Muffled. Starved. I got a letter in the mail yesterday. No return address. Inside was a deed. To a cabin. Far north. No swamp. Just snow. But written at the bottom, in handwriting I now knew too well, were the words, "A quiet place to rest." Just one rule. Never answer if you hear knocking. I burned it. Because I finally understand. The house never dies. It only moves on. And now, I know how to say no. The end.